Welcome. You're watching Physical Activity Researcher podcast. Interviews with world-leading physical activity researchers. I had experience with it when I was working in Shanghai as a postdoc. We did one study which was validation of different wrist-worn devices, mainly consumer devices. We had also researched great devices, but when you're using the consumer device, you are like, this is easy. The data goes automatically to your phone and you can see it. But then when you actually have different participants and you need to have different background information, so you need to create own account, usually for each of the participants.
Mm-hmm.
And you create that usually in the researcher's phone, the study phone in a way, because otherwise participants would need to install a lot of different apps in our case. And actually getting the data out from the application is very difficult. And in our case, I think we lost almost 50% of the data because the connections didn't work. We couldn't download. It was a lot of work. We worked a lot to get the data, and I think in the end we ended up losing like 50% of the data.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And publishing that paper was crazy because all the reviewers were just kind of saying that, how bad did you do this? How can you lose so much data? But it was just that the connection didn't work when there was many devices. We couldn't download the data for some reason. So I would discourage against that. It was not.
Yeah,
not
here we go,
nice.
another reason. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was not nice to do. So I think it's a good point. How do you see any changes for this in the future, or do you think this will remain the same?
I would hope actually that the research grade devices would become even more user friendly, because I think that's what's so attractive about the consumer grade ones. So yeah, I think that's kind of the change that I am hoping for.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think it will go earlier. It was kind of just enough to provide a device for researchers, but now there's more competition, and I think that's good because then you really need to also think about the ease of use. And I think with the consumer devices, they will go forward pretty fast. The technologies, like now, most of them can measure heart rate from the wrist, which was not, I think 10 years ago, you didn't have any devices that can measure heart rate from the wrist accurately. And maybe there will be sensors measuring blood pressure. Maybe you can measure something from the blood, something from the concentration of the sweat. So I think there will be a lot of interesting things. I think the problem still might be that if the algorithms are proprietary, that you still cannot use them. But I think maybe the way is that the new technologies we can get to research great devices then from the consumer, that consumer devices make it cheaper to produce those things, but that remains to be seen how it will go.
And then also with like the consumer grade devices, they are so often updated. You have like new models all the time. So the science is constantly lagging behind a little bit. And by the time a certain device is validated, it might no longer be available. And I'm not sure that's going to change. And obviously that the device has been validated is important for research.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. From our validation study, before we even submitted the paper, one of the big companies have bankrupted. The other one was purchased by Google. So even submitting the review, there was so many changes, and then it was a difficult review process. So yeah, that's very good point. So maybe as an overall point, if you can use research grade devices, you will avoid many of the headaches, and publishing will be easier.
Yeah.
And then the next chapter is a special note about children with disabilities. I think it's a very important chapter. I think many times this is not considered.
And actually, I personally, like, it wasn't at the forefront of my mind when I started this, but then I was reading about it and I realized like this is actually very important. I already touched on this a little bit earlier in the ebook that children with disabilities need to meet the same recommendations for physical activity as those without disabilities. So that includes like 60 minutes of physical activity a day, limited sedentary behavior. Sedentary behavior, not just meaning sitting, but because you can also be physically active while sitting. That's relevant for kids who are in a wheelchair, for example. And so there are actually international guidelines, especially as well as some national ones in certain countries that say that these kids and adolescents also deserve to be involved in research. It's important that we measure them. It's important that we give them feedback. The challenge, of course, for a researcher is that you need to go about it a little bit differently. And for example, a thigh-worn accelerometer on a child who's in a wheelchair is not going to give you that much information. So you really need to think about it. But there is some research being done. And for example, for wheelchair users, you would attach an accelerometer to the wheel or one of the wheels, and then also one to the wrist. Like that's one solution. This category, of course, also includes kids and adolescents with mental disabilities. And there you also have some resources out there, for example, questionnaires that are made with like simpler language, a lot of pictures. But I would really like encourage any researcher to kind of dig into this a little bit deeper. There are some resources out there, and it's important that we do include them in our research.
Yeah, I think it's important, and I think now we need, for example, for algorithms to detect, we need kind of easy way of adapting the algorithms. For example, when you have older people, they are walking slower, so maybe the threshold to detect walking needs to be brought down. And then you have, for example, children with cerebral palsy, where the walking patterns are probably less symmetrical. So you need to kind of give more leeway for the algorithm that this is probably walking, even when with other algorithms it wouldn't be. So I think we need some kind of way of adapting the algorithms more easier within the softwares, within the ways that we analyze. And we are working on, we have some grant applications with Fibion and some researchers that we could adapt the algorithms in our cloud, that we measure the raw signal, and then the cloud is running different algorithms that you can choose different special groups. Let's hope that we get the grant and we can actually do that one. How do you see
that sounds great.
How do you see this one going in the future? What would be your hopes and wishes, and what are your predictions?
I actually worked in a research group last summer where we studied people with paraplegia, and we used accelerometers to analyze their wheeling behavior as well as their walking behavior, if they could walk, and we tracked changes over time as they were recovering. So I know that research is being done, and I know that those algorithms, for example, are getting better. Yes, otherwise, I wish I knew more about this topic, actually. And but my hope really is that we are going to pay attention to them. It's probably not going to be the case everywhere.
Yeah, I think that's good. We have some customers with Fibion in Helsinki University Hospital, the Children's Hospital, and they are doing movement analysis with children with cerebral palsy. That's quite common, that you you do the movement analysis before a surgery and then after a surgery. That's kind of the success of the surgery, that did the walking behavior or the biomechanics of walking improve. But then it's also that how does it translate to normal life? Do they move more in normal life? And then you need to track in daily life. And also I think many times the problem is that they are not moving enough. There might be social things that which discourage them to move, as they are a bit moving differently than others. So I think that's important to consider these special groups all the time. But I think it's going forward.
Which is great, yeah. And I think in all of this, like not just with children who have disabilities, but for the whole human population, really, it's important to remember, like, we're measuring this so that we can make those changes. That's why it's so important to even measure physical activity in the first place. Like, on the one hand, we're studying the positive effects that it has, but then also a very important outcome is so we can create interventions that then allow us to move better, or allow the general population to move more, move better, become healthier.
Yeah, I fully agree. And then in the ebook, the last one is key messages. How would you summarize the key messages of this ebook?
Yeah, there are quite a few. I think one very big one is to not oversimplify. Like, whatever method that you're using, it might seem simple at first glance, but as we touched on in this podcast, especially also with children and also adolescents, there are different challenges to overcome. So important to go through the literature to really think about things also, use some common sense, think about how they move, how they behave. Then also very important, you cannot really directly compare results from different methods. And sometimes even not if you use the same method, because, for example, with accelerometers, so many decisions go into it, so many different settings can be changed, and all of that will influence the final outcome. So keep that in mind when you're reading the literature or also designing your own study. So which method that you choose very much also depends on your research question. If your primary outcome of interest isn't even physical activity, but something else, you might be able to use a slightly less accurate method. You can save a little bit of time and budget there, and you can still get a fairly good estimate. The method choice also depends, again, on your budget, also on your expertise. Like, it might not make sense to use the most complicated setup if you don't have the expertise and also not the time to learn it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think many times it's easy to design research that we will measure everything perfectly, but it comes down to practicality. When you're actually there, for example, with the participant, and you're like, all right, we need to put these 7 devices on you and see that everything starts synchronously and the data is flowing, and you're like, we cannot do this. So I think importance of piloting, just putting on the devices, seeing that can we actually do this? How long does this take? Do we need to do something, for example, calibration for different signals? And it comes down to the practical things in in practice. And I think you cannot overstress the importance of piloting and really seeing that can we analyze this data? Do we get it correct? So yeah, I think the piloting is very important. And I think one thing you said about the complexity, it's good point, because it might seem simple, but when you start to think it a bit more, it might get a little bit more complicated. And maybe good to say this here in the podcast recording. I have had for quite a long time an idea that I would do questions and answers, kind of live show, maybe in Twitter rooms, which is just audio, that people could come in there they could ask their research or measurement related questions, and I could answer what I know. There could be some other researchers. It could be this kind of forum of having questions and answers. So as I have said it now here in the recording, I might need to do it, so you can pressure me on social media to actually
I
do
think
it.
that's a great idea. I've been thinking about this a little bit too. And it's one of the reasons I find this podcast so valuable, because researchers know a lot and not all of it is in the papers. So if it's not your field of expertise, you can gain a lot from reading the papers, but there's also a lot to be gained from actually speaking with the experts. So I think that kind
And
of forum is a great idea.
yeah, and I think the problem is that when the reviewers are reading the paper, when you don't tell about the difficulties and lost data, you'll get it published easier. But then other people cannot learn from your mistakes. And I think a lot of researchers, I don't know if it's fair, but they kind of don't tell about all the data they lost and the problems they had in the measurements, because the reviewers are usually getting stuck with the lost data or something like this. So the research papers are always the good story, the ideal story, how everything went perfectly. But actually, when you're down there in the lab and doing it, there's so many things that where you have problems. And I think you
Absolutely.
need a different forum to discuss about these things. And I think the podcast is good one, and I think we could have some kind of Q&A part also. Anything else you would like to tell about the process of writing ebook? Any other things about it?
Just that there is still a lot more in there that we have now not discussed during this podcast. So I encourage our listeners to go and give it a read. We've also included quite a few references, which might be beneficial for you too, because sometimes it's not so easy to find all the papers, all the good papers. So we hope that this helps with that as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And how to get the ebook? So basically, you can go to our Twitter, the Physical Activity Research podcast Twitter, and there, as a first tweet, we have pinned this one. If you retweet the tweet and follow us on Twitter, we will send the ebook to you as a direct message in Twitter. So basically, retweet the post and follow us. So we have built this, of course, that we will get more attention to the ebook, but I think it's a good deal. You get the free ebook, and we get more people to see that there's a free book available. If you happen to listen this podcast episode much later, now it's summer of 2022, and we have had some other Twitter post that is more important. It's not there anymore. We will then add the podcast, a link in the podcast description where you can download the ebook. So that's how to find it. And yeah, we really find that you find it, the ebook, useful. It's about 25 pages of text, and
Yes.
then the references.
But it's not super dense text. We try to make it a pleasant read and nice to look at.
That's the difference between research articles. So it might be a more relaxing read for the listeners. But
And
yeah,
if
this has please go on.
Sorry, and if like this is not your primary field of research, it might still be interesting to give this a read, because there's a little bit that you can learn, and hopefully that'll be interesting for you.
Yeah, perfect. So it has been pleasure doing the ebook with you, Ugne, and this was a nice recording. So thank you for taking the time for this recording.
Yeah, I enjoyed it as well. Thank you.